For our agenda, I do want to just briefly touch on CAD in general, as well as allaying some fears about the tailoring and customization of our system. If you have worked with other providers like Archibus and other systems like that, the idea of customization can be a bit scary because of how time-consuming and expensive that can get. So I just want to allay a couple of fears about that. Demonstration, of course, we'll look at space and occupancy basics. We will walk through a move management process. That can be pretty variable based on what your needs are. And so I've essentially just picked one sort of level of that process that we'll kind of look at. And, if we want to look at any of these things in more detail, we can set up a follow-up meeting to do that. We also will touch on just briefly Matterport integration. I'm not sure if everybody here is familiar with Matterport.
I've used it in a move. Yeah, I'm basically 360-degree photograph.
And then, of course, during this process, we'll be looking at some reporting options as well. So just two more little brief slides as intros. One of the things that sort of separates us from other systems is that you don't need to have certain software for CAD. You can basically use anything you want. It can be DraftSight, it can be AutoCAD LT. There are no plugins that are needed for any of this stuff. You don't have to buy any additional software on top of what we are going to provide. If you do already have licenses for AutoCAD and the various flavors thereof, you can certainly use them. But if you do need to bring new people on in order to do some sort of CAD project, they wouldn't have to have AutoCAD. They could use something like DraftSight or the much cheaper options. DraftSight, for example, is like about $200 as opposed to the $3,000 or whatever it is that AutoCAD charges these days. We don't have any file size limitations or anything like that also. Again, just very briefly, tailoring this system, our entire system is built around this, and a lot of the customizations down the road are things that the core users would be able to do. So customizing reports and things like that, you're not going to have to come back to us for those kinds of things. But also during the onboarding process, when we bring you on, we are going to leave you with a system that does everything you want out of the box. Certainly reporting and stuff like that, we have tons and tons of out-of-the-box reports, but if there are certain things that we don't already have during onboarding, we would make sure that you have that. Another thing that's just kind of worth pointing out, and I could provide this chart later, but there's a lot of things we will not even charge you for. So if there are small changes to reports and forms and things like that that you need, those things are going to be done in a day or two, and in many instances, those are not going to be charged. So again, I know that there's a huge speed bump for a lot of people bringing a new system on board because they're afraid that, yeah, sure, you're going to charge us this much up front, but then, it's like every week I'm going to have to pay you for another 8 hours worth of work or something like that. And that's just not how we do business and not how our system is set up. So again, don't want you to be overwhelmed by the idea of having to do that. So let's go ahead and jump into our demonstration. So
can I ask actually a question really quick?
Of course.
So with some of I guess we have some integrations, other places on campus. So OIT uses some of our system to get, building information.
Sure.
That would be, so that part is customizable too, not just the internal part, but maybe communicating outwards.
Yeah, we have a variety of ways that outside systems can interact with us. Sort of the simplest thing that always comes up is like an HR integration, right? So we can do something super simple like receiving flat files like Excel or XML or even CSVs of HR data. Stepping up from there, we can actually do API integrations. Certainly another extremely common thing is going to be an SSO. Just actually coming into Zoom, I saw it mention something about your SSO. So yeah, all of those kinds of integrations are available. We have sort of generic and then customized APIs. So generic being that an admin can come in here and actually mark certain tables like the building table. It can mark it as being available to the API. And then, there's some really standard kind of API stuff that people can then request information out of the building table, for example. So
okay,
yeah,
awesome.
Certainly happy to work with IT or whoever about dealing with that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm sort of skipping the login process, and I've landed on a dashboard here, and the system is going to know who I am and what my role is. So this particular dashboard that I've landed on is focused on space management and occupancy and personnel and that kind of detail. There are dashboards for sort of more public users. There are dashboards for other areas of interest. So for example, work and maintenance management and other things like that. So, what your role is going to determine what your dashboard looks like. But just like I mentioned about, tailoring the system and whatnot, these kinds of interfaces are often very easily changed by anybody who's an admin, can come in and add buttons and do things like that. So I'm just going to point a couple of little, customization things like that out every once in a while. I don't want to belabor that too much. So just some general notes about the UI in general. Of course, you'll see we've got some random little widgets here that are all related to space. There's a bunch of those in the system, and every user can, customize those based on what it is that they're interested in. So I just have a couple of different types here to show the kinds of things that are available. So for example, up here in the top left, we have all of our space broken down by the building and the category, and you can move your mouse over all these things and get more information. Same thing with the various other little charts and KPIs that are showing here. In the middle, of course, we've got the sort of main activities that we're going to be doing with our space and occupancy. You'll see that we've got some kind of high-level buttons here that we can click on to, for example, categorize our space or status our space, a generic way to just sort of drill down from the buildings and look at space that way. A couple of dedicated things for personnel, and then we've got some shared details. So, all of our various background data tables. So like what are our space statuses, what are the categories that we can use, all the sort of background details that sort of get into space management. And then finally, there's also a sort of little find area, and this would be provided basically to anybody who has rights to the system. So when I say anybody who has rights to the system, what I mean is that, of course, there are various security roles. So people may be core users who are actually doing the space management, but you can also have dashboards that are available, for example, to the higher ups who aren't probably going to care about the individual management of space, but may want to be able to access certain reports themselves or may want to be able to find information themselves. Same with staff and students. I don't know if you have provided access to your students, floor plans and stuff like that, but we do have ways of providing that kind of information to students if that's something that's of interest.
Rich, I have a quick question. For argument's sake, would there be an interface like a GIS map or something that, because what we have to do at the moment is we have to look on a wall on a map and find out that if we don't automatically know the building number, and then go into that building and then drill down into the software that we use, Archibus, as you know. Sure,
there are various ways to access this, and I can certainly show a top-end map interface as well as just the top-end list interface.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, I mean, why don't we just go ahead and take a look at what these kinds of things look like. So this is just a big list of our buildings. There's a couple of notes here I do want to talk about, just again, sort of general interface ideas, because there's a few concepts you're going to see repeated basically everywhere in the system. So yeah, we do have just sort of a big list here. This can be organized by basically whatever you want. Right now, it's broken down into categories of buildings. If you have different sort of zones on campus or something like that, this can be broken down by zones. For example, if you have maybe different states that your buildings are in, I don't know if you have sort of, some off-campus kinds of things, but yeah, so there's lots of options here in terms of how these things can be grouped. We can also actually just turn off grouping. So here's just a big dumb list of our buildings. So, if you didn't know the code, you shouldn't have to look at some chart on a wall. You can, just come to the list here and use the tools to filter based on category or based on other details you might have. All of these filters will basically reconfigure based on, what your needs are. I know you guys have quite a few more buildings than what we're showing here in our little sample set, so it may seem obvious that it's easy to find something here. But, certainly I can just start typing something in here and it'll filter down for me. So yeah, you can search the list, you can filter it using sort of pre-configured filters, you can group it, sort it. This is something that happens in every list in the system. And not only that, we're sort of looking at things here in terms of let me just change this back to here. Seeing this in sort of big tiles like this, you can also always switch to just like a text-based list of things. So again, this happens everywhere, common feature across everything. One of the things you may have also noticed is that there is a little map button right here. So I can click on that and get a map view of the buildings. So this can be a street view map. It can be aerial photography. We noted that you guys have sort of a custom graphic on the interface that you have. We can use that kind of graphic as well to present all this. So in terms of GIS, yeah, we can present both building information as well as, I don't know what other kinds of GIS information you have, if there's like protected, wildlife areas nearby, lines, polygons, whatever kind of details you need, certainly we can present. One of our other customers is a university that has a lot of outdoor equipment, for example. And so they can come to an interface like this, see all their buildings, all of their outdoor equipment, and be able to drill down and find information about anything. So, clicking on any of these things here, we can go to the same sorts of interface from the map that we can access from our list. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you.
So yeah, space management, we have our list of buildings here. Obviously, there's some summary information about how much area each of these things encompasses, et cetera. And another sort of common feature everywhere is anytime you see one of these little chevrons like that, it means that there are some options available here for us. And so from this interface here, we can drill down and see our building information. We can jump straight to the floor plan itself, or we can see where this is on the map. Let's just come in here to our show details. So this is sort of our main interface for the building as a whole. We've got a couple of little summary details up here. If there are certain things that are important to you, this form can easily be adjusted to have additional information here at the top. You'll see that there's a number of areas of interest across the top here, so we can edit, and this will give us access to a lot more details, sort of just text-based details on the back end. You'll see that we have access to documents, so all kinds of documents could be uploaded against a building, or really any record in the database can have additional documents associated with it. We can also do things like have internal conversations about this. And then there's some other lists here about just show me all the personnel, show me all the space, et cetera, as well as some reporting that is geared around just this thing. But sort of the main area of interest, I think, is this area down here. And so what we're seeing, of course, are the various floors. Some of these are floors where we actually have floor plans, and then some of them could be, for example, a roof. You can have site plans and things like that. All those things could be loaded here. So what we're seeing by default here is the occupancy status. So what that is telling us is, how many of our spaces are at capacity versus underutilized, et cetera. Now, I realize, of course, that you guys as a university, not all of your space is, like a corporate space where you're assigning it to people, et cetera. But I know that certainly there will be some of that space here, and that's sort of what this little focus is. So you'll see that, once again, we have a little chevron. So from this chevron, we can drill in and view just sort of text-based details about the drawing. We can actually download the DWG. We can view the floor plan live, and that's what we're going to be mostly focused on. And then mentioned earlier, the Matterport thing, if we have 3D integration, we can dive into that. So let's just go ahead and click on floor plan so we can view the sort of main interface for dealing with drawing. So this, of course, is one of our floor plans. This is all live from the DWG. You'll note that it's sort of like a Google Maps-y effect that, when we zoom in, things will resolve. So this is not just a picture. This is the actual vector detail of, the DWG. So if you have extremely large floor plans or, some stuff with a lot of detail, you can always zoom in. You will not lose that detail. So a couple more notes about just sort of general interface for the space manager. tools over here, sort of changing the way we're interacting with our drawing. And then over here, we've got our queries. So right now it's configured to show our occupancy plan. So this is a labeling query. And you'll see that we also have a space occupancy status, and this is a highlight query. So, and I can do various things. For example, I can, toggle these things on and off. I can actually add various queries manually if I'd like, etc. So clicking on any of these spaces here will give me information on the right that is relevant to my current task. So what is my current task? Well, currently I'm working with occupancy. So right now, this is basically telling me, whether or not I have people assigned here. You'll see if I move over to this other one, it tells me who is actually seated in that location. But there's a lot more that we can do other than just occupancy. You'll see that we have a series of 6 buttons over here. These are 6 common tasks for space management. And depending on what your needs are, there may be more or there may be fewer. So for example, flooring, if you want to establish, certain spaces have carpet or whatever. You can also deal with customization. Actually, it'd be easier if I come back here to the legend. So here's all of our various categories that have been set, as well as, who owns what spaces and some information about equipment. So depending on what it is that I have selected over here, if I click on one of these spaces, the form is configured basically for that specific thing. Now, again, there's lots of stuff on the back end though. So for example, if I want to come to, the sort of more complete view of the space details, I can always do that as well. So let's just see how I can make some changes here. Let's say I want to set this as carpet. So I save that, and now you'll see that my little legend has updated there. I can also click on multiple spaces in order to affect, various changes all at once. So again, I can do things like setting my status. Again, I don't know exactly how you guys are set up, but if you do things like hot desking or hoteling for your staff, those kinds of things are available here. But again, let's just sort of stick with our flooring example for the moment. So we'll say that that's all carpet as well. And so again, that'll just update immediately and give me my legend over there. Some other things you can do is you can measure distances on this drawing. You can also measure areas. So not only can you, of course, click on any of these spaces and see how much space is actually in there right now. Maybe you wanted to divide some sort of space up and you want to be able to tell like, well, okay, but how much space is that going to leave me with? Okay, well, that's going to be 377 square feet. So you may have access to CAD yourself, but not everybody is going to be CAD aware per se. And so this kind of an interface can be provided for people to be able to go in and do these kinds of measurements and things themselves. Any of the views that we're looking at here at any time, these things can be printed. So we can click our little print button here. The sort of standard thing to do, of course, is to bring this out to a PDF, but you can also just print directly to an image, as well as actually downloading a highlighted version of a DWG. So if for whatever reason you are working in AutoCAD and you want to get people's names into the spaces and be able to work with that in AutoCAD, this is a way you could potentially do that. So we can do all sorts of things here, changing our paper size. I know a lot of other systems have limitations on paper sizes and things like that, or problems printing. I don't know if you guys are still using plotters, but some of our customers have gigantic floor plans that need to come out in Architectural D or Architectural E. That's always an option here. So let's just go ahead and print this. And that'll bring up a PDF here. And so this is just an example of what this can look like. I didn't really discuss it too much, but there are options for changing how the legend works and, adding title blocks and other things like that. It's also worth pointing out that even in PDF form, you will not lose definition when you zoom in. So this, again, is not an image. This is an actual vector PDF that has all the detail needed in order to be able to zoom in. Again, even on large floor plans, you're not going to have a problem with this. Should also look at how do we get people into spaces and how exactly does that work. So you'll note, of course, that with our little chair selected here, now we're on our, again, back to our sort of occupancy view of this. All we have to do to assign people to spaces is come to our little list here. The way this is currently working is that we are currently filtering to people that do not currently have seating. There's some other filters here, and we'll sort of save that for later. But if I just want to grab somebody who needs seating, you'll note that my legend is telling me that green spaces are underutilized. So this is essentially vacant space that can accept another person. So all I need to do is click on one of those spaces, one of those names, and then just drop them onto the drawing. So this is how you can get people into spaces. If you are doing obviously move management and want to have a status chain, again, we're going to mention some stuff about move management a little bit later. But if all you need to do is just drop somebody in, this is how you can do it. You'll note that if I do select somebody here and add them to a space that really isn't supposed to have more than one person, it's going to turn red. It'll be marked as overutilized, right? So our terminology here is sort of blue is at capacity. This is what we, that space only holds one person and we have one person there. Red spaces are overutilized. You could have a space that says it allows for 4 people and you have 5 in there. That would also, of course, be considered overutilized. And then the underutilized space is all in green there. So that's sort of the simple way we're going to get people into spaces. If you did add somebody to a space and you didn't mean to add them, you can always just click on the space there and then either remove them from this seating or assign them to a different space here if you wanted to do that. One of the things I didn't talk about is there is just a little button here that I can go to different floors straight from this interface, so I don't always have to go back to the bigger building interface to do that. So in sort of summary, there are lots of little tasks that we can do with the drawings. Any sort of attributes about the spaces can be set here. Any attributes about the people, we can move people around, make sure that they're in the right seats. And if you are doing things revolving around furniture or revolving around equipment that can be moved, those kinds of things can display symbols on the drawing. A couple of different big categories of reporting, one of which is going to be sort of asset focused. And what I mean by that is there are reports that are just going to tell you about this one thing. So just about this building. So all of the reports right here, this is all just kind of a lot of basic stuff here. These are all going to give us information just about this building. And there are also, of course, global reports. So those are kind of the big categories. So this is loading a couple of different charts and stuff. So this has taken a couple of seconds. So this is an example of a formatted report. So obviously this is coming out in PDF, allowing us to do some of the same stuff we saw on the dashboard, for example, showing us some charts. We can also render out, of course, our various floors. So this is just showing us, some of that same detail we already saw. So this is an example of a formatted report relative to the building. We also do have the tabular reports. So, in addition to being able to access those kind of pretty reports, we can also basically just download this data into Excel anytime we want. There also is a tabular report viewer in the system, and we'll look at that in just a second. So in terms of exchanging information with the system, we can always pull data, like anything you can view in the system can be pulled out to Excel. There are also tools for importing that data back in. That is kind of an admin task. Your users who are marked as admins would be allowed to do that. Obviously, importing a whole bunch of data at once can be a little bit dangerous, so that's usually restricted to admins. So let's just go back to our dashboard, and I'll just come in here to reporting. So this is a small sample of the kinds of reports that we have. So for example, if I want to get all of the information in the system broken down by the division as well as the category. So this shows me, for example, okay, our academic they have 123 offices across campus, and that encompasses 23,000 square feet. So this is the kind of tabular interface that you can work with here in the system directly. But again, this can always be pulled out to Excel. So I realize we're already sort of running low on time, but I do just want to show you, again, I had mentioned some things about customization. Any of these tabular reports, you can do all sorts of things to them right here in the system. So for example, If I want to, I'm just going to build a quick little example here. I'm going to search for all of my conference rooms, and I just want to see, how much space do we have devoted to conference rooms and who actually owns that space. So I've limited it to conference rooms. I'm going to turn on an aggregate down here at the bottom. Let's turn on a count as well. Let's do a count there. And then let's say I just want to see, how that's broken down by our divisions. And then last but not least, I'm just going to summarize this information. I realize that I'm moving kind of quickly here, but just to give you an idea, any of these lists that you can deal with in the system, they can be quickly filtered, they can be quickly aggregated, and then summarized. So this is just my conference rooms owned by various divisions, how many of those they each have, and how much area that encompasses. So in terms of customization, there are lots of things that the individual users can do for themselves. Those kinds of reports can be saved and offered up to the other users. Any questions in general about reporting, or does that all make sense?
Is there any way reporting by time to a space? And I'm thinking more like a classroom that is utilized, it's say a 30 capacity classroom.
So this is sort of in that vein. This is work management. This is just completions of work tickets broken down by the category and the month. So I realize you're talking about time. We also do have time breakdowns that can happen, but this is sort of a possible display if you're summarizing a lot of information up into we call this a scorecard of, completions and things like that. What kind of data are you hoping to summarize by time?
Well, just if a classroom has a capacity of 30 and there's only ever 15 in it, it would be nice for the registrar to be able to look at that. I mean, it requires manual input, of course, to make that happen. But we have a different system for doing that. And I just wondered if it could be an add-on widget type thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't really sound like that would be much of an issue. One of the things that can also happen, this is sort of related, is, again, maybe a little bit more focused on a corporate environment, but the occupancy usage over time. So, last month we had 53% of our space was used. Now we're up to, 70% or something like that, broken down by week or broken down by month or by year. So yeah, there's tons of options there. In terms of actual classroom usage, yeah, it'd be interesting to look at that. Of course, that's not the number of students in a particular class wouldn't normally be something that would be tracked here, but we could certainly accept that information from an API and be able to report on it. So
yeah, probably would be that. Okay, thank you.
Because normally our system wouldn't be the system of record for the students.
Yeah, it was just like a sort of view or a dashboard or something. Yeah. Somebody could look and say, okay, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and sort of mentioned on this little chart I was showing before is that, there are options for things like new tables. So if there's data that our system isn't even expecting, that still isn't going to require more than an hour or two of billable time to create something, like a new table to accept that kind of data.
Okay.
So that's the sort of space basics. Again, I realize we've only got about 10 minutes left now. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the move management process. We'll look very briefly also at sort of a staff interface. So moves could be included on this same dashboard. We actually right now have it set up as a separate dashboard. The sort of core of a move project is the status chain and who needs to be involved at what stage. So I'm just going to talk briefly and we can, again, we can schedule a later date. We can actually walk through this and look at it. But basically a student or somebody else makes a request. There is a little student form for them to say, hey, I need to move. I'm going to keep saying student, but of course this could be limited to just staff or, whoever it is that you want to limit it to. So they would make some sort of initial request with just kind of a basic description of what it is that they're trying to accomplish. The MAC team or, the relocation team would come in. There would be some sort of initial approval, in some cases by a cost center manager or somebody like that who would have to look at the basic details. So our system would send them an email that says, here are the basic details. Is this okay? They would be able to say yes or no. You can then come in and start doing planning. So, establishing all the people, you can add spaces. They'll just move the contents of a space, for example, move just particular equipment. And so there's an interface here for basically establishing the from and to locations for everything. Once that's done, there's basically a final approval. Hey, did we get this correct? Is this really what you asked to do? There can then be some scheduling established using a calendar. Finally, it goes into ready status, and depending on how this is managed, I don't know if you guys have an internal set of trades workers, for example, that are doing these moves, or if this is submitted out to another organization to do it. But basically, the goal of all of this is to establish basically a report that can be handed out. So the summary of the move, who is moving, what are their dates, and then all of the from and to locations of, the floor plans. This person needs to move from here to here. There are also sort of compressed versions of this that don't result in quite as many pages, but try to still convey the same sort of information. So if you are using an outside contractor, this is something where you can just print a PDF and hand it to them. It has all the dates on it, all the from and to locations. There can be notes associated with each individual move task. Hey, you need to move this person's desk or something as well. And then it can sort of get more complicated from there. So if IT needs to be notified, or, hey, there are barcodes on their equipment, please scan these barcodes and make sure that these pieces get moved, et cetera. But again, we can send you the example of that output if you just want to see sort of the general idea. If you are doing an internal move where you have trades workers and whatnot, we can either have an API out to a work management system where individual tickets are generated, or also our system, of course, does do work and maintenance management if you need a system for that as well. So last little quick thing is, I did mention that there can be thinner interfaces. This would be styled for you, for students and staff. And, depending on what kinds of activities you are doing, you can adjust what they're able to do. So, if you're not doing space reservations or something like that, you don't need them to be able to find people, you'd be able to edit the dash for them and configure it. So one potential thing is to give them access to basically just a list of buildings and let them look at floor plans. Those floor plans can, of course, be sanitized to some extent if, your main floor plans that you're using internally have equipment and other stuff you don't want students to see. Those things can be sanitized. You can also give them the ability, for example, to just come in here and actually search for spaces. And, once you find that, you can either look up details or you can actually navigate to it. So showing you the navigation options from where you are, showing you how to find the elevator, and then actually how to find the space that you're interested in. So sort of one of the options to give to students would just be the ability for them to, bring up the floor plans and see, okay, where are the stairs, where are the public bathrooms, et cetera. So this is an example of what it looks like when symbols are overlaid on our drawings here. So.
And Rich, just a quick question on that one.
Yeah.
So is it possible then we could look at it through an iPad or some sort of smartphone?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's really something I should have addressed right off of the bat. But yeah, all of this stuff is going to work on any device. So obviously most of the demonstration today has been on a sort of a desktop interface, but everything knows how to reconfigure itself to work in different environments. So if I just want to sort of see details about this, this can be done from any device. So this is an example of, I'm of course logged in as an admin, so I have access to things like the spatial metrics and occupancy details and whatnot. All of these little sections are all securable. So if all you want to do is let them find out where it is, you could mark all these other things as secure. The student or staff or anybody outside of the core team would just be able to kind of come in and view the floor plan, maybe a couple of details, but wouldn't get sort of the more sensitive information. So yeah, everything from the dashboards to submitting requests and things. So for example, submitting a service request, all of this stuff is reconfigured automatically for different devices. So everything works on a phone.
Okay.
So even you as a core team member, if you're out in the field and you want to view the same sort of reporting and stuff like that you would be able to see back at your desk, all of that can still be done. Let's turn that.
Yeah, especially like if we're doing some sort of walkthrough audit, it would be nice to be able to pull those up either on a smartphone or Surface or something and be able to make those real-time adjustments.
Yep. So that looks like we're 2 minutes away from running out of time. So, that's the sort of basic gist of it. And just coming back to our little discussion, I'll just skip over that. But there are lots of other things that we didn't talk about, other modules that are available, integration things that are available. We do work in maintenance management. We have visitor management, reservations, hot desking, equipment audits, ergos, all sorts of things that can be expanded into later. So if you have any sort of last minute questions, feel free to ask. Again, of course, if you want a follow-up meeting that goes into any more detail, we're happy to do that as well.
Yeah, it was awesome. Just want to say thanks.
I have one question about the Matterport module or interface, whatever.
Yeah.
Would that be something that you would visit and do Matterport of all the spaces for us, or we would have a tripod and camera and then use Matterport to integrate it into the system?
So we would probably not be doing that, but there are, people basically in every state who are, available to do that. So it sort of depends on whether or not you guys have your own, Matterport setup. If you've already...
No, we don't, but it was something we would really want to possibly do, I guess, once we speak to the team, buy a license and the equipment and do it ourselves.
Sure. Yeah. I'm sure that would be more cost effective. So yeah.
I think we do have someone, Lee, because I know that they've done like little tours of how you could walk through buildings and stuff. So
yeah, what it looked like. Yeah.
Right. And so from the sort of floor plan as a whole, you can get here, but you can also go to individual spaces in the sort of floor plan view in our system, and then just, click on a space and have it bring you directly into a space in the Matterport system.
Wow.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time, and obviously feel free to follow up with questions over email. And as I keep mentioning, if you want to do something in a little bit more detail, then let us know, and we'll be happy to set up another meeting.